Tonight on Greater Boston, coming to you from the Boston Public Library, I'll talk to Congressman Jim McGovern, who's leading the state delegation, most of them anyway, in opposition to a federal plan to close the Northampton VA hospital, which he's preparing to take up with President Biden. We'll get into that, the war in Ukraine, Senator Elizabeth Warren's warning to Democrats about a midterm wipeout, and more. Then later, Chris Doughty, who along with Jeff Deal is vying for the Republican nomination for governor. After nearly a century of caring for local veterans, the VA Medical Center in Northampton is on the chopping block. The Federal Department of Veterans Affairs recommended the closure last month, saying the Edward P. Bolin VA Medical Center was among those that are, quote, no longer well located to best support the veteran population. Instead, the department says that 21,000 former service members who currently rely on the Northampton facility can be better served by other existing VA centers in the region. But plenty of others disagree, including nearly every member of the Massachusetts delegation who signed a letter expressing deep concerns about the proposal. The lead author of that letter, Congressman Jim McGovern, joins me now. He's also chair of the House Rules Committee. Congressman, it's good to see you.
Happy to be with you.
Before we talk about U.S. veterans, can we talk about men and women fighting in Ukraine? Are you comfortable with the level of support our government is providing President Zelensky's?
I am. I mean, we're providing a great deal of support, and we're going to continue to provide support. I understand where President Zelensky is coming from. He always wants more. We are providing him more, and our allies are providing more as well. I think the support that we have provided has enabled Ukraine, I think, to do what a lot of people thought was impossible, to hold off Russia and their powerful army. And it's an inspiration to see President Zelensky and to see the Ukrainian people stand up for their country.
Well, they have held off the Russians in many regards, but there's also been a slaughter of the Ukrainian people. Here is President Zelensky with Jake Tapper from CNN on Sunday's show.
Every year on Holocaust Remembrance Day, politicians put out statements that say never again. When the world says never again, do they ever mean it?
I don't believe the world. After we see what's going on in Ukraine, we don't believe the words. After escalation of Russia, we don't believe our neighbors. We don't believe all of this.
By the way, and as I'm sure you know, Congressman, President Zelensky had relatives who died in the Holocaust. Sanctions, weapons, no one would quarrel that we've done a lot. But as I said, the slaughter continues. It seems that in many ways President Putin is deciding how far we can go. He says he'll consider air cover an act of war, troops an act of war. He even said this week more weaponry is an act of war.
Well, there will be more weaponry and there will be more air support provided directly to the Ukrainian military. But let's be clear. I mean, Vladimir Putin is a brutal dictator. He's now added war criminal to his resume. What he has done in Bucha and what he has done in other places are tantamount to war crimes. He's crossed a line, quite frankly, that there's no going back. And he'll never be welcomed in the international community again. He's now in a league with Kim Jong-un in North Korea. And so, yes, we have to try to find a way to get them to back off. But the world needs to hold Putin and those who are complicit with him accountable, whether it's the International Criminal Court or others. They at a minimum have to be world pariahs, and they will be.
But the U.S. doesn't even belong to the International Criminal Court. Isn't that a great inhibitor?
It's unfortunate that we're not a member of the International Criminal Court, but that doesn't mean we can't be supportive. That doesn't mean we can't provide help with making sure we're maintaining evidence and building a case against Putin and those who are complicit with him. By the way, it's not just Putin. It is everybody who is justifying this, everybody who's been on the battlefield, everybody who's ordering these mass killings.
Can we come back to the United States? I mentioned in the lead you are leading the fight to keep the Northampton VA open. Why do you oppose the closing, and what's the likelihood of success in your estimation?
Look, for years I've been fighting to get a VA facility built in Worcester because veterans in central Massachusetts have to go to either Northampton or to Boston for their care, and they had huge waiting times accumulate. And we finally were able to get something built in Worcester in conjunction with UMass Medical School. Now they're talking about shutting down the VA facility in Northampton. Thousands and thousands of veterans rely on that place. In the justification for potentially closing the facility, they talked about all these investments that need to be made. What that report doesn't say is those investments have been made. Tens of millions of dollars have recently been invested in that facility to bring it up to standard in a whole bunch of ways. So the notion that somehow it is appropriate to even consider closing it makes absolutely no sense to me.
So why are they doing it? What's their agenda?
Well, I don't know what the agenda is. I mean, they are following a recommendation in a bill that Congress passed a while ago. I didn't support it, by the way, but that talked about looking at all of our military base, our VA facilities, and seeing where we might find savings by closing it. This is not the place they should be looking. And we've sent a letter to the VA Secretary Dennis McDonough. I'm going to talk to him next week. I'm doing a listening session tomorrow in Northampton where we're going to listen to our local veterans and get firsthand testimonies of why it should be remained open. But this cannot happen, and it should not happen. And they ought to they ought to make that clear immediately, because a lot of our veterans, are dealing with all kinds of anxiety over the potential that this must be closed. But this is a stupid recommendation, and it needs to be brought to a close.
If you also go 12 miles down the road in that same part of the state was the horror at the Holyoke Soldiers Home, where 76, maybe counting the next year, 77 veterans died. And it seems to me, Congressman, there's been very little accountability. Criminal charges brought by the Attorney General against the two top leaders there were dismissed by a court. A guy who was an interim head picked by Governor Baker has now filed a whistleblower complaint saying he was fired as soon as he filed something with the Inspector General. Can you tell a veteran that there's been any real accountability on that front either?
No, and again, our heart aches for those who lost their life at that facility and for their families, and they deserve the truth and they deserve accountability, and we need to make sure that happens. In the meantime, the idea that you might close a VA facility that provides health care to thousands and thousands and thousands of veterans in Western Massachusetts makes absolutely no sense to me.
Let's go to another topic. I'm sure you read Senator Warren, your colleague's op-ed in the New York Times. Let me just read you one line from it. She says, to put it bluntly, if we fail to use the months remaining before the elections to deliver on more of our agenda, Democrats are headed toward big losses in the midterms. Do you share her view?
I do. I mean, I think the challenge for Democrats is we need to remind people what we've done. I mean, we have Republicans taking credit for projects in the American Rescue Act and in the infrastructure bill when they voted against these bills. We need to remind people what we've done, what our agenda is to get us out of this inflationary moment in our economy, to help try to deal with the cost of energy. And then we also have to, quite frankly, we have to draw comparisons. I mean, I'm the first to admit the Democrats are not perfect, but let me be honest with you, they're nuts. All right, I'm just telling you. I mean, giving the keys of government to people who coddle people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert and Paul Gosar, that is insane. These people are not interested in governing. They don't care about protecting Social Security or workers' rights or the environment. They care about Twitter following, and pleasing the most extreme elements of the right. So, we have a lot to do in terms of getting our message out, telling people our record of accomplishment. But we also have to remind people of what's at stake. And I am really worried that this election, these midterm elections, really are going to be a bellwether as to whether or not we continue with our democracy or we go in a very different direction. And there's an awful lot at stake here, and we need to sound the alarm bells.
What's a different direction? Can you describe what you think would happen if the Republicans took back the House or Senate?
Well, I think what they would do is advance at the national level what they're trying to do at the state level. Legislation to not only suppress the vote, but to be able to give people who don't like the results the ability to nullify elections. Some of these made up social, polarizing issues that they're pushing, against the LGBTQ community, In states, they would do it at the national level. Tax policies that go to big corporations and to the wealthiest at the expense of the middle class. I think an attack on organized labor. I mean, and no attention to the climate crisis that we have. I mean, their agenda is the agenda of the Republican Party now is not the agenda of the Republican Party of your father or grandfather. It is the most extreme right-wing QAnon elements that you can imagine. I deal with these people every day. I have to work with people who tell me that January 6th didn't happen, that it was a bunch of patriots that attacked the Capitol. So those are the people who you would empower with the Republican victory in the House or the Senate. And we can't let it happen.
I have to make one correction. That's, of course, unless your father or grandfather is Donald Trump. Congressman, if I can, Elizabeth Warren's contention, as well as your colleague Ayanna Pressley, is the President of the United States has unilateral executive authority to forgive student loans. They both would like to see $50,000 in loan forgiveness. Do you believe the President has that power?
I do, and I'm with them on that.
Why doesn't he use it?
Well, we have made appeals to him to use that authority, and we will continue to do so. I think it's the right thing to do, especially at this moment.
You know, Congressman, people have seen you on the show and follow your career, I think would acknowledge you're probably the leader in the Congress on food security issues. And we've learned in the last few days that a number of Republican governors have turned back food supplements through the SNAP program to address food insecurity. That follows on the heels of Republican governors, some returning money for housing security, before that health security through Medicaid funds, through the Affordable Care Act. How is this even possible? How is it legal? How is it moral for a Republican governor to return federal funds that would directly help low and moderate income people in his or her state?
Yeah, well, there's no morality in that, and it is cruel, and it shows how little they care about people who struggle in their states. Look, I mean, we're coming out of this pandemic. Hopefully, inflation is a factor here in the United States, as it is all around the world. So prices are up, and people are hurting even more. And to kind of turn a cold shoulder on suffering that is happening in every state in this country is cruel.
But you're the Rules Committee chair. Can you design legislation in these areas in a way that they're directed to the individuals affected and can't be vetoed and sent back by governors who are trying to do some political grandstanding?
Well, you know, there's a lot of things I can do in the Rules Committee and things that we have tried to do in the Rules Committee. Unfortunately, I need 60 votes in the Senate to do anything. And that's one of the challenges that we have. And that's why we need to get rid of this filibuster. But the bottom line is that government can help during this economic crisis and provide relief, especially to the most vulnerable. Food prices are up. Hunger is up. We need to do much more. And I should just add, you know, I think we are very close to getting a commitment from the Biden administration to develop a holistic plan to deal with food insecurity and nutrition insecurity in this country. I think we're going to finally get them to agree on doing a White House conference on food, nutrition, health, and hunger. We haven't had one of those conferences in 54 years. And when we had it 54 years ago, the WIC program came out of it. The modern day SNAP program came out of it. So we have an opportunity to bring everybody together to try to figure out how do we end hunger in this country? We're the richest country in the history of the world. Tens of millions of people don't know where the next meal is going to come from. We got to do something about this. And I think this may be a way to focus attention on this issue at long last.
Hope it happens. Congressman, good to see you as always. Thanks for your time.
Good to see you. Be safe.
You too. The next major hurdle in the race for the next governor of Massachusetts is just about a month away, the Massachusetts Republican Convention. And among those vying for the job is businessman Chris Doughty, who spent 30-plus years building and growing a metal manufacturing company before diving into his first run for office earlier this year. He joins me now. Chris, a pleasure to meet you. Thanks so much for being here.
Oh, Jim, thanks so much.
Why do you want this job and why are you qualified?
You know, I want to make the state more affordable. I've been here for 30 years. I have heard it from the citizen, from employees of my own company. I've heard it from those that I work with in my community. And it's just become so expensive to live here and also for our businesses.
You've acknowledged you have no political experience, a ton of business experience. If a politician who was successful said, I'd like to come run your business, I've never run a business, I have no business experience, would you consider him or her for that job?
Yeah, when I look at the job description of a governor, I've been doing it for 30 years, building teams and organizing and problem solving, budgets, complex budget issues. I think the responsibilities of a governor are very simple, very similar to running an enterprise like mine.
So most of the Republican governors, at least in my 35 plus years in Massachusetts, are self-described fiscal conservatives and social liberals. Would you describe yourself the same way?
I would. I am fiscally conservative. I worry about overspending. I worry about waste and fraud, and I worry about making sure we get the most for every dollar that our citizens pay through their taxes.
That's only half of the descriptor. The second half is social liberal. Do you think that fits you too?
Yeah, I do. I think I'm a moderate man. I think I'm sensible, a common sense. I realize that everyone has different life experiences, and I would approach the job with that perspective.
But am I not right that your position on abortion is only exceptions for rape and incest? Is that not where you are?
Yeah, I'm pro-life, but I also recognize it's in the state constitution. I have no intention or interest in ever making a change to it.
Well, if you were governor when Charlie Baker had the Doe Act put on his desk, which expanded abortion rights, I think it was in late 2020, he vetoed that and it was overridden by the legislature. Would you have vetoed the Doe Act?
Yeah, this is one of those issues where the citizens' interests and what the citizens want, I think the governors need to reflect what it is that our citizens would like. And I think what they ended up doing by putting through the veto ended up being added into the Constitution is now set in our state.
Well, it's a statute. It's not a constitutional change. But let me be clear. Would you have vetoed that expansion of abortion rights like Governor Baker did?
Yeah, I would have followed Governor Baker on that.
So, to be clear, should the situation present itself, you would oppose any expansion of voting rights, abortion rights. I just want to be clear. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would follow Governor Baker on that.
You voted for Donald Trump, I've heard you say on television in 2020. Why?
I thought his policies began to make a lot of sense to me, particularly as I've mentioned, the Chinese trade practices were really difficult on my business and particularly on my customers' businesses. And I was grateful that someone eventually stood up to the Chinese and said, hey, we've got to have a fair field here for us to play on.
In my understanding, I think it was on Channel 5 you said recently, you were asked if you'd vote for Donald Trump should he be the Republican nominee in 2024. And your line was, typically, I always vote along party lines. So that means you would vote for a man who was impeached twice, a man who a judge in California was a coup in search of a legal theory, a guy who I think credibly has been charged or at least accused of leading an insurrection. You're comfortable having that kind of man be the President of the United States again?
Well, as I said before, is that historically and typically I vote along party lines. That's been typical for me.
But you voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016. She's not a Republican.
Yeah, it's typically. I mean, I try and look at every situation as best I can. And, as I've mentioned, when President Trump first came on the scene, his tone was a little harsh for me. It was a little difficult for me to get my mind around.
But again, if I may, just briefly, Chris, the evidence is mounting that he led an insurrection. He continues to lie to the American people about how the election was stolen. You're not worried about the danger to democracy of another term of that individual?
Well, as I've said many times on the campaign trail, these are not the issues I'm running on. I believe that there are some immediate problems in our state. The press asks me these questions all the time, but I'm out campaigning. This is not what the citizens are talking about. They're talking about high cost of living here. I hear from business owners every day that they're planning on leaving our state because they just can't afford to be here. These are the real life, kind of heart-wrenching stories that I'm hearing out on the campaign trail. And I think we all need to pivot a little bit and say, let's talk about those issues, because around the kitchen tables, people are hurting. They just, financially they're hurting. The inflation, is out of control, the cost of living in our state. So I hope the press begins to pivot and say, that's old history. That's a long time ago.
Well, it's not history. He's thinking of running in 2024. But let's pivot since you mentioned it. What could you as governor do about inflation in Massachusetts?
Well, not much on inflation, but certainly right now we're the second or third highest cost of living in America.
Yeah.
For our businesses, we are the most expensive state in the country to operate a business. How many more businesses can we lose before we all say, hey, it's time out? Also, I genuinely believe that the next governor will have to get us through a recession, and it could be a very serious recession. So I think we have to get our balance sheet in order. We've got to pay down our debt. We have to get ready for that. And we've got to keep our businesses from leaving.
How would you rate Governor Baker's 8 years in office, Chris?
I'm not here to rate anyone. I think I think I would like to build on the things that have worked, that he's implemented. I think that we would build on things that are working, and I'd bring my own perspective, my own view of the world to the job. And, I come from the manufacturing world, the working class families, and I think I would have a real focus on what do we do for those, the working families.
Well, let's talk about one subset of working families. You chose a running mate who voted against, as a legislator, state rep, against banning conversion therapy, which I assume people know is a discredited, dangerous procedure to attempt to change a person's sexual orientation or gender identity. Why is that not a disqualifier, Chris Doughty?
Well, first, let me just say that I'm absolutely opposed to conversion therapy, and so is my running mate. We neither of us support conversion therapy. That what I explained on TV is that the reason she opposed that bill is because there was specific wording on what a therapist could talk to their patient about. And she felt like that was an overreach, that we shouldn't interject government between patients and therapists.
I understand that concept, but I looked up this afternoon. The vote on that measure that she voted against was 147 to 8. And in fact, 3/4 of her fellow Republicans voted for the ban. So is the notion that she saw something that 95% of her colleagues, including 75% of her Republicans, didn't understand?
Well, I think that was her record. She voted it that way. She explained it to me that way, that she was not supportive of conversion therapy, but just didn't like that language between a therapist and a patient. And I understood that.
So, Chris, we here at GBH have invited you and your opponent, Jeff Deal, to debate prior to the primary. You're looking for a debate pre-convention, am I right? And by the way, you have accepted. Your colleague, your opponent, Jeff Deal, has not yet. You're looking for a debate pre-convention, is that correct?
I would like lots of debates. I have a vision and plan for our state that I think will really resonate with the voters. I want to get it out. I'd like to shout it from the rooftops. I want to take our state a specific direction, and I want the opportunity to debate it as often as I can.
Here's what Jeff Deal's campaign manager said in response to your desire to have a debate before the convention. Mr. Doughty has yet to achieve the 15% vote of delegates required at the GOP convention in order to proceed past that, nor has he gathered the requisite number of signatures to make the ballot in November, so the discussion of Republican primary debates is premature. Are you able to say now that you have the support of 15% of the delegates and you have the 10,000 signatures necessary to qualify for the ballot in the fall?
I think we'll be fine on signatures. We every day we're calling delegates, trying to get to our 15%. So I'm very hopeful, and we're working hard.
Chris Doughty, it's really good to meet you. I hope to see you a lot, and I hope there's a debate right here in the near future. Thanks so much for your time. Chris, good
Likewise.
to meet you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
You can find our past interviews with the other candidates for Massachusetts Governor, Republican Jeff Deal, and Democrat Sonia Chang Diaz, and Maura Healey online at greaterboston.org. That's it for tonight. Please come back tomorrow. I'm joined by the nephew of the man who was killed after his arm became lodged in a Red Line train door last week. Plus, the investigative reporters behind the disturbing but important new Washington Post series, Broken Doors, on the dangers of no-knock warrants, the low bar to get them, and the lack of accountability when raids go wrong. That and more tomorrow at 7. Thank you for watching. Please stay safe.
Hey folks, today we're in Copley Square in downtown Boston. You know, usually I'm the guy who answers your questions, but today you are going to answer my questions about the unwritten rules and quirks of life in Boston.
No respectable Bostonian calls it Beantown.
Some people call us the 617 because 617 is the Boston area code.
Yeah, the bean. Well, that's what I've heard it as, the bean. Boston the bean. Baked beans, I don't know.
Where I see the mailman, he wears shorts, you know? And some other people wear shorts, you know, I guess it's a fad.
I never could get into shorts in the winter, but we do have some Bostonians that can do that.
Shorts is, if you can handle the cold, I definitely recommend wearing shorts.
The streets aren't like other cities, like how it's more grid-like. Ours is literally all over the place. You could be on one street for a minute and that street will literally turn into another street and you won't realize it. There's a lot of one-ways, there's a lot of dead ends, there's a lot of cul-de-sacs.
Don't drive your car from place to place. It's not going to work.
Why is that?
And, well, first of all, you can't get parking even if you wanted it where you want it. And secondly, you're going to be forced to spend what you would consider a mortgage for your house to get a parking space.
I have been using the T, but it's super simple for me. It's really easy. It gets me where I'm going pretty fast.
T's frustrating. It's gonna take you about an hour to get anywhere on it. It's gonna take you a while, so be patient. Relax, bring a book. I felt like this is a pretty accessible city by foot.
There's so many times where I've almost ran people over for jaywalking, and then we do it, so.
I mean, who wants to go from corner to corner? I mean, you know, to cross the street. If I see that it's clear, I jaywalk.
One thing they don't take into consideration, iron don't cry.
Jaywalking is part of our revolutionary spirit. That's how we keep it alive. I'm very good. I'm very good at it. I haven't lost anybody now in 3 weeks.
Well, there you have it. Don't forget to like and subscribe and let me know what unwritten rules of Boston you live by, or let me know what you're curious about because, hey, I might just look into it for you. I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. Stay curious out there.
The Curiosity Desk is sponsored by Emerson College, inspiring curiosity and creative expression in all of us.